The idea is that, ADHD or ADD are not born at the age of 20 or 18 when you have to go to college. And suddenly you turn out ADD. Okay? If you are ADD, your parents will know it, your brothers and sisters will know it, your teachers will know it, everybody will know it. It doesn't appear from nowhere. Okay? So this is to prevent people from coming up with ADHD symptoms at the age of 18. There should be clear evidence of impairment in social, academic, or occupational functioning. So you should present the symptoms not only in school but in some other environment as well. And other causes of symptoms are ruled out, like anorexic kids who have extreme problems with attention, and other emotional problems should be ruled out. Okay, what is the attentional network? Attentional network talks about 4 different components. Sustained attention is achieving and maintaining an alert state or the ability to allocate attentional resources, or in simple language, to sit quietly for a long time and focusing on whatever you have to do. Selective attention, the ability to focus on sensory input, visual or auditory, while ignoring distracting stimuli. And in a second I'll show you tests so it will be clearer. Orienting of attention, selection of information from sensory input, or the ability to direct, disengage and shift attention in the visual field. Okay? And executive attention, resolving conflict among responses, or the ability to plan, organize, and execute complex activities. And here are examples. One more thing that I want to say about it is that each of the 4 components is associated with a different region in the brain, which actually is a kind of an evidence for the dissociation of these components. So kids with ADD may have only deficiency in only 1 component or 2 components. They don't necessarily appear all of them together, and the components are functionally okay, which means that the components are functionally dissociated. And you have here a map of the brain and the location of each one of them. And each of the components may be associated with different behavioral. The first task that we use in order to assess sustained attention, it's called continuous performance task, or otherwise known as CPT. And in this task, what you have to do, there are many different stimuli. Sometimes they are one-dimensional, sometimes they are two-dimensional. This is a two-dimensional stimuli in the sense that there can be different types of animals and they can appear in different colors. And there's one animal in one color, which is the target, and what the examiner is asked to do, the examiner will keep a finger on the spacebar, on some other key, and is supposed to press the spacebar whenever the target is on. It's a very, very basic function. Very basic function. All you have to do is to press the spacebar when this is on, but the trick is that this task, this extremely boring task, goes on for something like 10, 15, sometimes 20 minutes. So you can realize, so you can imagine the kids that can sustain attention for a long time, they'll be all over the place. So sometimes they'll press before, or there'll be a blue horse and they'll press the key because they see the horse, or there'll be a red elephant and they'll press the key, which is called commission errors. They'll have omission errors, they'll just lose attention, and some of the targets will go on unresponded. So we are actually measuring these two, the commissions, the percentage of commission errors and omission errors, and we are also monitoring calculating the mean response time and the standard deviation of the response time to the target. Because if it's not a target, you're not supposed to press, so there's no response time. Okay? So this is how we assess sustained attention. This is selective attention. Okay, this is selective attention. This is feature search. You are supposed to, you are presented with a screen with lots of figures, and you have to say whether there is a red circle or not on the screen. So the moment there is a red circle, you're supposed to press. If there is no red circle, you're not supposed to press. But it's more difficult because you have to actually find the circle. And this is a two-dimension, the same, it's conjunctive search, where you have actually two different figures and two different, once again, two figures and two colors, and you have to press whenever there is a red, wherever there is a red circle. So you have to search the screen and see if there is a red circle. So this is selective attention. This is orienting of attention. In this case, you have a cue that tells you that the target will appear either on the right side or on the left side, and then the target appears a few seconds after, or a few milliseconds after the targets appear. And what we are actually monitoring here is the degree to which the cue is helping you reduce the response time, the efficiency to which you use the cue. So some people that can't orient attention, will take, it doesn't matter if you give them a cue, you don't give them a cue, they'll take the same time. And the last one is executive attention, where you have, once again, two domain stimuli, and you have to say, well, for example, in this case, you have to press the space bar whenever you have an arrow pointing up, but you may have arrow being based down on the screen here, down on the screen, and it's pointing out. So the fact that the arrow is located at the bottom of the screen is maybe a major distractor. Some people can just can avoid, and it's very confusing for them. They can't focus on the target. So whenever there's an arrow, doesn't matter if it's pointing up or if it's at the bottom, or if it's pointing down but it's based at the bottom of the screen, they'll press the key. So that's executive attention. Okay. We have 10 minutes. Some diagnostic issue and challenges involved with the diagnosis of ADHD. The ADHD population is highly heterogeneous. As you see, we have lots and lots of behavioral symptoms, and at least 4 components of the attention network. The diagnosis relies heavily on self-reporting. All the behavioral symptoms we assess through a self-report questionnaire, which is a problem when it comes to possible malingering or finding. It's partially retrospective. We're asking kids to tell us how they perform, or we're asking adults to tell us how did they do 20 years ago when they're kids. And thus they are susceptible to memory flaws and finding. There is evidence of significant over-identification, at least 30%. The last figures that I have heard is that there's major over-identification. Many ADHD symptoms are part of human nature and may be triggered by other factors such as stress, sleep disorders, and so forth. And many behavioral symptoms included in self-report questionnaires of ADD and ADHD are also common in various emotional disorders like anxiety and depression. So that makes it even harder. Some critical issues in the diagnosis of learning disability. A complete model in the diagnosis of learning disability will usually include standardized and appropriate cognitive tests, well-documented school achievements, developmental history, educational history, previous diagnostic report, and personal interview, and you have to pray that all of them will provide a consistent picture, because some of them, using so many sources of information, and sometimes it's all over the place. They're doing very poorly on the test, but they're reporting having no problems, or they're reporting to have major problems, but they're doing very well on the test. So it's very tricky because we have a lot of sources of information, and not always they give a consistent picture. Critical issues in the diagnosis of learning disability. Each disability may have multiple sources. We have already seen that. There's a high rate of comorbidity, which makes it even more complicated. There are multiple alternative explanations for slow test performance, as we saw in the definition, and there might be low motivation for finding. So all of this adds to the complexity. Some data integration issues. We talked about the possibility of having inconsistent results between test measures. Similar skills can produce tests assessing similar skills. Sometimes can produce completely different results, and there's no way we can explain it. And the same goes to hierarchical skills. So lower skill may be deficient, but but upper scale will be doing much better, and there might be some contradictions between the data. Okay, we have 10 minutes left, and I've been rushing through, so I just want to ask if there are any questions so far. Everything is clear. Okay, so let us take 5 more minutes and just go very quickly through some of the issues that have to do with accommodation. Visual, paragraphing, and large scripts. Response accommodation, it's the way the examinee gives the response. That can be oral versus written or transcription. Setting accommodations, individual administration, separate rooms. These are usually used for students with ADD. And timing accommodation, which are the most popular, at least in Israel and in the States, which include extended time on test or multiple sessions. These are the 4 different types of accommodations. And the shoots, as I mentioned, there are basic requirements of test accommodation. The first one is validity, the elimination of construct irrelevant variants. Whatever is irrelevant to the construct that we want to assess, we want to take it away. Okay? So just as somebody who doesn't see properly, so we'll give him glasses, but we won't have him do the test without glasses. And we want to ensure construct representation. We want to ensure that everything that all the components of the construct that we are assessing will be there. We don't want to remove any of them. And there's a very nice quote that I found by message that say the tests are imperfect measures of constructs because they either leave out something that should be included or else include something that should be left out. So that resonates with the validity. And they should be effective and fair, and namely ensure appropriate compensation. So you have to do, we've seen how tricky it is to diagnose very specifically the sources of each and every learning disability. So you have to be very particular in the diagnosis in order to offer the best accommodation that will actually compensate for the specific deficit. There are some, when we are coming up with, there are some considerations determining accommodations. Some of them are considerations that are involved with the examinee variables. That is the nature of the disability, the particular cause and deficit, the severity of the disability, and the existence of comorbidity. But there are some other considerations that are involved with the task, with the type of task that we are asking. With the type of the task that the person has to do for the test. This is the construct being measured, what exactly are we measuring, the particular nature of the task that measures the construct, the type of the stimuli, the response mode, whether the person has to write a response or just identify the correct response. That would make a major difference in coming up with accommodation, and the purpose of the test, the meaning of the score. And we talked about it. Okay, I think I'll sum up here. We'll talk about the validities and effectiveness, and some research findings. Well, maybe this should be the last one. Some research findings, differential impact on students with and without disability provides evidence that the accommodation removes a barrier based on disability. So research shows that accommodation do help those that need them. Timing accommodation, extended time seems to help learning disabled more than non-learning disabled students. And extended time also helps non-learning students. So it's not only that it helps the learning disabled, it helps them more, but it also helps the non-learning disabled. Okay, so if somebody doesn't need to get extended time, gets extended time, so we are giving him bonus. All accommodations seems to be beneficial, mostly in math tests, and all reading of text items significantly improve, all reading of text and items significantly improved the scores of learning disabled students, but not those of non-learning disabled. So if we use this accommodation, reading out text whether by the computer or by a proctor. It usually helps only that have reading problems, but it doesn't help those that don't have reading problems. So there's no, it's a very valid accommodation, but it's very expensive. Okay. Okay. I think we are more or less done here. There's just a few references that you might want to look at. And this sums up our learning disability workshop.
Yeah, I have a comment on that. What hearing impaired people say is that their cognitive structures are different because they're using sign language, and it's a totally different language. So we are now embarked on a research to find out exactly which items in the test may be biased against hearing impaired, and then we'll take these items out of the test and give them the test without these items. So this is the accommodation that we are planning to give to deaf people.
And slow learners is a completely different story. I can't answer this because this was what I was talking about, for the past hour.